Welcome to the ODP cast, the podcast all things ODP. With this podcast, we will attempt to inspire and educate and hopefully get a few laughs along the way. We'll be covering many different topics relating to the profession, such as what's new, some around education, some around research, and many, many more. We'll also be doing some reaction videos to some of the funny videos that we've seen on the internet, so make sure to follow us on YouTube so that you can see what we see. Tune in to get updates. Get involved by following us are at ODP Shoe across all major social media platforms, and remember to save this podcast to keep up to date with myself and our many guests as we add a little Yorkshire twang to the fantastic profession that is operating department practice. Welcome to the first episode of the ODP cast. I'm an ODP, and they go, what's that?
Is that what
Yeah.
you do? You just pass things and you go, no. I pass things in a very specific order.
Someone said, "Oh, so you're like a glorified waitress."
Oh yeah, so like in the police.
Yeah, there's not many 5-year-olds running around in scrubs saying, I want to be an ODP.
You know when you have in movies that like slow motion run and like the music playing in the background and like the American flag floating. It was one of those moments of just running in.
Confirm that you don't put your mask on after you've scrubbed. That poor patient's brain is now infected with whatever was on Benedict Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch's face.
Can't wear them in clinical practice, can you?
No, well, exactly. You can't get away with these bad boys.
So, be prepared to laugh your socks off.
I'm prepared.
Hi, my name is Chris Matthews. Welcome to the first episode of the ODP cast. During this episode, what we're going to do is just go through or explain and explore what is an operating department practitioner. I'm very lucky to have some guests join us today. Guest number one, reveal yourself.
Hello, my name is Jenny Ward. I'm an ODP and lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University.
And who's behind guest number two?
Hello, my name is Joe Lee and I'm an ODP and I'm a lecturer at SHU.
Thank you for joining me today for our very first episode of the ODP cast. So the topic of today is just, what is an ODP? Because I don't know about you two, but I get that question all the time.
All the time, constantly. It seems like the most unknown profession in healthcare, and even other healthcare professionals have no idea we exist. So yeah, all the time.
It's funny when you go around the hospital and like you finally let outside of those theatre doors and you go into different departments, and then you go and you start that meeting and you say, oh, I'm an ODP, and they go, what's that?
What's that stand for?
And then you think, how long have I got right now? Shall I give you
this could take some time.
Or the short answer. So I guess that leads us into, how do you describe what an ODP is to other people?
Joe, do you want to go first?
Oh God, yeah. I describe an ODP as the James Bond of the NHS, because nobody knows what we do, but we turn up to save the day.
Oh, wow.
But honestly, it's just it depends on who you're talking to as well. And actually, I've been surprised by a lot of qualified professionals who you really have to baby them through the steps of, right, this is what we do, and I guess it's the fixation of, so is it like a nurse? Is the difficulty to get across?
Yeah, and I sorry to interrupt. Like, I suppose for me, I almost end up saying that instead. The easiest way I find to describe it is, oh, it's like a theatre nurse, but it's not, because a lot of people understand what a theatre nurse is. So yeah, I kind of go with it's like a theatre nurse, but we're trained predominantly to be in this area, and we like do additional things like the anaesthetics and stuff. And the one that gets me, the one that I always use, especially for people who don't work in healthcare at all, is if you've ever seen a movie or TV show when a surgeon goes scalpel and a hand comes across, that would be our hand handing it over when we're working on the scrub side. So yeah, we're there as sort of that assistant to surgeons, anaesthetists, basically supporting the patient and the rest of the team through perioperative journey from start to finish, in various different places.
And then the number one question that usually comes back is,
what's perioperative mean?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
That and the so you just pass things then?
Yeah.
Is that what you do? You just pass things and you go, no, I pass things in a very specific order.
Yes. I had it once that someone said, "Oh, so you like a glorified waitress?" I was like, "Oof, oof." Like, you just bring stuff to people, you just pass things to people. It's like, that's not only a slight against waitresses, it's also a slight against healthcare professionals as well.
I've definitely changed over the years the way I describe it to people, depending on the situation. I think sometimes for me, the best way I've ever found to describe it is an individual understands the like of a dental nurse effectively. And they say, so imagine what a dental nurse does for a dentist. I do it for surgeons and anaesthetists, plus so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And then the biggest comeback is that, wait, so you're in the surgery, you see it, and you're like, yeah.
Or so do you do like operations and stuff? Do you like get to cut people open? It's like, if you do advanced training, you get to support, but you're not really like. And I think that's the hardest thing about describing the ODP role, is because we've just described the very basics of what our job is, not actually describing all the, advance in practice and the alternative roles and the advancements that ODP role has progressed into even further than that. We are literally just scraping the surface of what an ODP is, and even that sometimes is hard to describe and hard for people to wrap their head around what we do without like linking it, like you said, to what people perceive as a more understanded role, like the theatre nurse or dental nurse or things like that. So that's, I think, where we sort of struggle. And I think because of only just recently joining like the allied health professions world, even in that kind of context, there's nothing in that allied health professional thing that we can even link ourselves to or be similar to, like physios and OTs and TRAD and DRAD. They're all quite linked together, but there isn't anything similar to what we do without linking it outside of allied health professions.
Yeah, I think that there's some links that you can make in relation to the closest thing that I've found is paramedic, effectively, where you sort of say, so there was a really interesting quote that I heard recently where it's like, so imagine a paramedic, but in the hospital. So we're a paramedic for a hospital. So we move critical patients potentially around, or we work with the anaesthetist. And like, that seems to like be a way to go. And people go, oh, okay, I get that.
Yeah, so because that's what I say sometimes, is like we'll deal with emergencies, we'll deal with the similar stuff. We have similar skill sets to paramedics. We just don't like the rain and the late nights. It's basically doing it in a more comfy environment in a hospital setting rather than out on the streets. But
It's definitely the rain for me.
Yeah, the rain. I wouldn't want to do it in the rain.
No.
I wonder if that's where we go wrong as a profession, though, that we try to, because of people's lack of understanding, we try to link it to something else.
Yeah.
What we should be able to is describe it as its own entity rather than linking it to something to make it more understandable.
Yeah, and I think as time goes on and as the profession grows, because realistically, when you look at this profession in relation to other professions, it is relatively new.
So junior. It's
so junior. We're in
new.
its really infancy, effectively. And therefore, as that develops and as time develops and as more people gain an understanding of what that role is, I think eventually, I'm still waiting for that day, but then when someone describes another role and goes, oh, like an ODP.
Yes. Yeah, it'll come. It'll come.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
So you touched on something really interesting, Jenny, like the fact that someone thought you were like made a comparison to a waitress. What's the strangest response that you think? Do you think that is the strangest response, or is there any other strange responses that you've received?
I think that was probably the strangest one, mostly because I didn't even quite get how the link was made at all. But I think that was one of the strangest ones. I suppose, yeah, I haven't really had anything other than like, oh, yeah, do you get to do this? Do you get to do that? Like, have you seen this? I suppose a lot of people just ask us questions about it, like, oh, well, what's the goriest thing you've ever seen, or what kind of things what's your like scariest moment and stuff. So yeah, that's probably my worst one, is the waitress comment.
Yeah. What about you, Joe?
So be prepared to laugh your socks off.
I'm prepared.
So it was when I was, because obviously back in the day when we trained, oh God, I feel old now. It was obviously a diploma program. I know that there's people who obviously did the MVQ version and various other sitting guilds and what have you. So we were only 2 years. So when I went to university, obviously all my mates were in their third year and I was just qualifying, which was great because I was the only one that had any money. But essentially, we sat down on a group of lads, young lads in the third year of university, sat down like for a social, and they sort of chatting around like what we all do and thinking like, so what is it you do, Joe? And I'm like, I'm an ODP. And then one of the lads turned around and said, I just picture you running around the hospital shouting, ODP, get out of the way. And what I mean, sometimes I wouldn't have said ODP, get out of the way, but sometimes I have shouted, get out of the way.
I was going to say,
and running around the hospital. So it probably wasn't that inaccurate.
do you know what? One of those moments, and it was like in a movie, like what you see in a movie. One of those moments, it was when I was on the cardiac on-call team, working at a children's hospital, and we had this patient who had arrested in ITU, and that we had to go and support, and basically it was an absolute disaster. Some of the suture line had ruptured, so they were basically bleeding out on ITU. So we went running down to support them, and it was a moment of like, we just shouted cardiac team. Well, it wasn't even me, like I don't know who it was that shouted it. It shouted cardiac team, and everybody parted from this bed space, and there was me and my little surgical trolley running in down the middle of it. And it was one of these moments, it's like, get out the way, it's the cardiac team, move out the way, move out the way. And it was like when you have in movies that like slow motion run and like the music playing in the background and like the American flag floating. It was one of those moments just running in to save the day kind of thing. But it was weird.
Chris, if you don't do a reel that's Jenny doing that,
oh no, it's coming, don't you worry. That was perfect.
That is a missed opportunity.
That is coming, don't you worry. That's coming as a reel. You want to see Jenny save the day?
Yeah.
That was good. The strangest response I've ever received was two, actually, I think, that are probably equal. I'd explain, because I sometimes don't always describe it as, I'll sometimes describe it as an ODP, or I'll just describe it as an operating department practitioner, so that at least then they've got operating department, so that they can potentially go, okay. One time someone turned around and says, oh yeah, so like in the police. And I was like, no, like in the hospital, in the operating theatres. And then one time, I think I must have said theatre practitioner instead of operating department practitioner. And they went, oh, so you operate the lights then, like for stage shows? And I was like, no, but actually I do quite often move the lights regularly.
It's funny, I've had that before where like, and now, because when I say, oh yeah, I'm an ODP, and I think it's probably a few times that I said I'm an ODP and I work in theatres, that they then just hear theatres and go, oh, like stage plays and stuff. So I now change it, so I say I'm an ODP and I work in operating theatres, just so they, and then even sort of back that up again, saying operating theatres, like surgeries and stuff. Like I have to give them that extra little bit of detail just so they don't get confused with which theatre we're talking about.
So, like, if you were to describe then this role to, say, I don't know, a potential healthcare student, or like someone that's doing like their A levels that are unsure what career to go on, and suddenly they're sat in this room that you're now presenting, and you're about to talk about the profession. How do you describe it? How do you explain it?
I like to go for the tact of thinking about the caring side and sort of the generic things, because we fall into this trap quite often of talking about, well, we've got 3 key roles and we work in anaesthetics and we work in surgery, we work in baco. And yes, that is a fundamental part of his job, but as many of us have seen and sort of been in the position of, that we do way much more than that. So I tend to think about the elements of patient care, being a patient's advocate, speaking up for the patient, providing holistic care, being sort of almost like a networking individual in terms of different areas of the theatre environment and a little bit wider. And then sort of linking the other parts there, saying we can work in different roles. It's very exciting that we've got, no 2 days are the same. I know that's cliche and everybody says that about ODP, and then actually in reality, in some places, some days are pretty similar. Talk about adult cardiacs, for example. It's like cabbage, valve, cabbage, valve. And try and pull on it there, because I think what happens, and maybe through no fault of our own as a profession, is that we say, well, we assist the anaesthetist and we assist the surgeon. And although that is the fundamental part of what we're actually physically doing, actually what we're doing behind the scenes in his minds and how we're practicing is thinking ahead. We're thinking about the patient. We're providing standards of care. I was in theatre the other night, and I'm thinking, if I didn't take the time here to provide care for like pressure areas, let's say, which, let's face it, is a really menial task, putting a gel pad under someone or making sure that wires aren't trailing. But actually, if I don't do it, no one will, and then the patient's going to get a bed sore, and then potentially an infection, and that's just, So that would be my stance on describing it. I guess now, doing the lecturing role, I've got a bit more of a wider sight of it, because I'm sort of out of the theatre bubble.
I think that's a really good point that you made, and I think that's definitely something that some people aren't aware of. It's that what you're involved in as an ODP, you're involved in some, and I know this is another cliche, but it's life-changing, life-saving surgery. Effectively, you're there to build a rapport very quickly with somebody that you potentially never met before, but you learn so much about their life, and they're so anxious. People that have operations remember like the build up to that operation. They remember the day. They might not remember the people around them because there were so many, but they'll remember you if you listen and you care, and it changes their entire journey.
And I think a massive part of the role being around that patient care and patient advocate is that people need to remember that these patients are in the most vulnerable position they'll ever be in. They are completely out of their control. They are anaesthetized. They have no say or cannot stop anything. You have to be that person's advocate. You have to make sure that you are working to what they would want. You have to ensure that the care you give is to the quality of care, the standard and everything. It's such an important part of that role that a lot of people don't sort of think about, and there is times where it can be, when you've got a busy list and stuff, that you are going, okay, well, next is a hernia, and you forget actually it's a person, not a hernia. Yeah, there's a hernia repair that needs to be done, but it's that person underneath. And that's where I think our role massively comes into that and plays into, is that being that patient's advocate. And like you said, Chris, you meet someone for maybe 10 minutes before they're then anaesthetized, and you have to figure out from that point of contact to them being anaesthetized what they're going to want, what their ideals are, like what they value, and everything based on a potentially 10-minute conversation. So it is a massive part of that that role. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've got to be adaptable. You've got to be flexible to a situation. You get very good at being able to read people in a quick sense. Because some people will want to be distracted by talking and some people won't, and you have to engage that center, engage that middle, and sometimes you can be a little bit, I'd say, silly sometimes. Personally, from a pediatric background, sometimes being silly did help, and being able to distract them with their favorite cartoon, for instance. But you have to be professional, and I became very good at like being silly to the patient and then turning and being professional to the family member when you're thinking about those family dynamics. So my next question is sort of like, and my final question really for both of you is, what do you think the future is for operating department practice?
I mean, the sky's the limit, pretty much. If that we could go anywhere, there's so much advancements, and not only in our role and where we're potentially progressing. There's already ODPs in alternative areas and working in areas that aren't, stereotypical to where ODP started out. The advancements in terms of education, the advancements in terms of technology, and just sort of healthcare as a whole, the advancement that's been made there, that there's room and scope for ODPs to sort of advance wherever they want. And I think, as we discussed earlier, like the fact that we are such a new profession, that we're only really coming up in the world of AHP, but we are making quite a big splash, as it were, within it. And I think we're being recognized a lot more, and being considered a lot more for different alternative roles and higher management roles, educational roles within sort of national business planning, strategic management, that kind of stuff in terms of health education England, or NHS England, I should say. So the sky's the limit.
And I think you're right there. I think that there has been some fantastic ODPs in the past that have broken that glass ceiling, shall we say, and gone for opportunities that weren't really an opportunity before for them, and they've created pathways effectively into other people being able to then partake in that role. And I think down to the skills and the attributes that operating department practitioners have, they can easily transfer those into different areas. What about you, Joe?
Joe,
anything to say on breaking a glass ceiling, shall we say?
It is exciting, and certain roles that like myself has been lucky to have and be a part of making that pathway. But I think first of all, there is something to be said of our development and importance just in theatres as well within our role. And that's not to say that we're going to all train up and be surgeons or all train up and be anaesthetists. It's to say that actually, as our knowledge base grows, then the patient's journey is only going to improve. So from that respect, we're going to significantly improve patient care and patient outcomes, and probably in the midst of that, efficiency, safety, and all those elements. But then, I guess the advancing roles. So I think we all just need to, this is just everybody in life. You have to add new strings to your bow, so to speak, to make you more rounded. And my first sort of experience of that within the ops management team, and that it was a really weird move, because I went from 120 mile an hour in theatres to quite a not slow pace, but a change of scenery. So going to work in 9 to 5 and in an office and in front of a computer screen. But actually what that did when I went back, because it was a secondment, when I went back to theatres, is all these things that you see on an operating list where they say risk of 52-week breach. And prior to that, and there's probably people who might be listening who think, what on earth does that mean? Because initially I read that and think, breach, well, they're not even pregnant. Genuinely. So understanding the process of waiting times and the fact that a patient coming in for the surgery, and it links back into that compassionate side, is this patient might have been waiting over a year for their surgery that they are desperate to have, because their life has been flipped upside down from pain or from cancer or from anything else sort of around that. So like that being it's like a sort of spoke off our standard role, but in essence it brought back to the normal theatre role, and I believe made me a better ODP on the whole, to understand that, and allowed me to be more caring and more professional. And you know, those times, and we've all faced it, where you know the surgical management team might have booked a list that has got risk of breach last on the list, and it's getting to 4:45, and you know the list's meant to finish at 5:30. And do you know what? Sometimes just having that understanding will make you think, you know, if this were me, I'd like staff to be sort of willing to stay. Although I do understand that, you know, there's obviously extra pressures from that point. Sorry, I've rambled on about that bit. And then the obvious one of being part of the critical care for neonatal and paediatric critical care transport team, and being the first ODP there, which was I mean, I was super lucky to get the chance to work with a really, really exciting team and undertake a role that was totally different from anything that I ever thought I'd be doing. Pushing out of the comfort zone, definitely. You know, essentially was acting as a critical care, a paediatric critical care or neonatal critical care nurse on transport, in terms of what the traditional role would look like. And it was only through COVID that was really achievable, because obviously we took the spotlight a little bit in the areas of critical care. I think everybody realised that, oh, hang on a minute, we've got this profession here who are multi-skilled, great with kit, and are a really rounded bunch of practitioners. And it was strange, really, because even in the early steps, so the old manager of the transport team used to say to me that, you know, everybody who comes into transport, no matter what the background, whether it be nursing, paramedic, a medic, as in a doctor, or advanced practitioner, or even like myself as an ODP, nobody comes into transport as an expert, because no matter what your background is, there's an element that you're not going to understand. And for me, in a weird way, it was sort of the bedside cares. So running, actually running all the IVs up and transfusing medicines, things like umbilical lines and UAC, UVCs on the little neonates just blew my brain. However, on the flip side, I started at the same time as a neonatal nurse, who brilliant at all the neonatal specific cares, but put her in front of a ventilator, and you know that was one of the most challenging things about the job for her. So it's I guess it's recognizing the learnable skills, and that probably applies to a lot of areas for us ODPs. So I guess in summary, in answer to your question, after a very long rant, it's just about us sensibly looking at where we do fit, and how we bridge those gaps.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I think one of the I did say that was my final question, but it's one thing that I forgot to ask earlier, so I'm just going to tack it on now and add it into the middle. I think one of the things to remember is that everyone's story of how they got into the profession is different as well, because I think it's one of the beauties of us having one of these unknown professions. Everyone has this different route of how they discovered it, and I think that that's something that people should share more. What's your stories? How did you find out about this profession that was so unknown?
For me, I had so at sixth form, I did all my A levels and everything. Had no idea what I wanted to do after that kind of world. Applied for biological anthropology in a university down in London. I think I picked biological anthropology purely because it was like the first course on the list when it came to anthropology. Biological, great, let's do that. So I applied for it, got accepted for it, was due to go and everything, and then I had like this sort of moment of sort of confidence crisis and why am I going, what am I doing? So I decided to take a gap year and defer the time. During that time I worked, I got jobs through a temp agency, and I worked like admin jobs in offices and everything like this, and then a job came up as a skills technician at a university in Birmingham. So I said, yeah, I can do that. I can easily get to Birmingham University. I can do that role. So I had an interview as part of this temp agency for it, got offered it, went and did it, and it was amazing. Got to play with all the mannequins and all the healthcare kit and setting up for healthcare courses at a university in Birmingham and all this kind of stuff. And then from there I was like, well, I need to do something, and I don't think going to do biological anthropology in London's a good idea. I don't think I'd get through it. I need something more vocational. I need a job. I need a career. My dad was in the fire service, so I started thinking about like public sector and working in either fire service, police, or the NHS. Looked at a few different options, but sort of kind of kept getting drawn more towards healthcare than anything else. And I think that was just because I was interested, like biological anthropology, I was interested in science, I was interested in people. So I started thinking about places in the NHS, and obviously the first few that came up, nursing. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I could do nursing, but I'd want to specialize. I'd want to do something a little bit different. I wouldn't just want to work on a ward. So I started thinking then about theatres and theatre nursing and stuff. And while I was working at university, I happened to start speaking to a lecturer, and he was like, nursing's not for you. And I was like, oh God, here we go. He's like, you should be an ODP. And I was like, what on earth is that? So he started talking to me about it, and it turns out he was an ODP lecturer at this university in Birmingham, and that I should go and attend it and I, go for an interview and try out. And I was like, yeah, no, this sounds more up my street. This sounds more me than anything else. So yeah, went for it, sat on the interview. He was on the interview panel for the course, got the thing. He then became my personal tutor at university, and actually when I left, he turned around to me and was like, you'll be back. And I was like, not a chance. I'll never do education again. It's nowhere. And he's like, yeah, you'll be a lecturer. You will be a lecturer at university. And here I am. So my entire life and career is down to one bloke telling me that I couldn't be a nurse, which I think is the best. Yeah.
And it's true that everyone has these little stories, really, of like how they discovered it in so many different ways.
Yeah. It was funny actually, because I kept seeing posters around for ODP, an operating department practice around the university, and I was like, what on earth is that? Like, didn't even register it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he started talking to me about it, then I was like, oh yeah, actually that's sounds more me than going and doing my nursing training. So yeah, that's how I did it.
What about you, Joe? What's your story?
I wanted to make film posters. Seriously, I wanted to make film posters at the little old age of 17, when you're applying for courses and stuff. So I went down this like rabbit hole of media and all that sort of stuff. And as you do, you speak to your link sort of tutors and stuff at sixth form or college or wherever you are. And my one of my sort of link teachers was an English teacher, and I'd had him since like year 9. So I knew him quite well, knew him for a significant period of time, and had a really good relationship with him. And he was just like, nah, you don't want to be doing that. And then I'm like, well, what about journalism? He's like, no. He says, you're too caring. You've not got he says, journalists are emotionless. there's nothing behind, you know, and they've got to be because of the nature of the work they do. So I'm like, what on earth am I going to do? Like, genuinely, I had this like crisis moment, and then I did the thing that all at the time, 2008-ish, males, male jocks, males, whatever, sporty males wanted to do. I'm like, oh, well, I could be a physio. And I looked into that. I'm like, no, that's way too competitive. I ain't got the point, because of the journey I was on. I didn't have the sport. I didn't have enough sciences to cover it. I had biology, but that was all I had. So I instantly just writ that off on face value. And then I'm like, oh, paramedic. Oh, I'd love to be a paramedic. So I explored that option. Of course, as we know, paramedic practice is an absolutely obscenely competitive profession to get into. And like many of our colleagues, I failed to get into it. So then just in a bit of a panic, really, because when you're in that point of UCAS and applications for university, and I know a lot of people that we know and deal with, and people maybe listening will maybe sympathise with, is that your UCAS application phase is such a stressful procedure. And if you're not entering that with a solid, this is what I want to do, then it's a really difficult place to be in. And that's all of a sudden where I found myself. At the time, I was doing voluntary work at one of the local hospitals, because that was obviously a requirement for the healthcare courses as a whole. I'm thinking like, well, maybe if I didn't get into this course, I could look at doing like foundation years or access course or something else. Crazy thinking when I came out with 3 A levels at BBD, I basically used to stay at my nan's a lot, and I went and I'm chatting to my nan, and we're chatting away, and she was chatting about her mom. And it transpires her mum was a scrub nurse. And then sort of linking that at a very similar time, I went and volunteered, and where I was volunteering was like in a admissions unit as such, but it were very much waiting area to here's your clinic room that you're going to be seen in. And one of the people in the volunteer team had a very good relationship with one of the ODPs. Had a chat to him, and then managed to get a last minute application in. By no means were it a done deal, because I rocked up to an interview, and I can remember, I'll not name names, but I think she definitely lectured you, Chris, was a nurse by background. She said, I can see the dreaded question in interview. I can see you've applied for a lot of courses. And I just wanted the ground to swallow me up. And I'm like, right, I can either try and lie around this and try and work out a way, or I can just be upfront. So I basically said the story that I've just said, this is where I'm at. And actually, do you know what? I've discovered it quite late, and it has been a bit of a rush process. However, like Jenny said, this is I can see myself fitting in really well here. And I feel like it's the right traits. It's not quite as on the at that point where my knowledge of ODP was. Obviously, I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. And yeah, I think the close links to the critical care element pulled me in.
It's funny, one of the points that you mentioned about the UCAS situation where you're unsure, because I was literally in the exact same boat as well. Like, I was doing my A-levels. I'd done one of those online professions quizzes, and it had come up with undertaker or drama therapist. And I went,
do you mean like the wrestler?
Like the wrestler, yeah, exactly like the wrestler. I was going to go into wrestling, or a drama therapist, and I looked at the idea of a drama therapist, and I quite liked it. I liked what they sort of did. It looked like a very good profession. So then I picked my A-levels with the option of doing drama at university and then either specialising in drama therapy or doing a PGCE to be a drama teacher. And then didn't really enjoy drama as much as I thought I would at A-level. So then I was in this position where I was like, what do I want to do? And I remember sitting down with my my college tutor at the time. She went, what do you want to do? I says, I want to help people. I want to work in a profession that helps people. So she says, well, why don't you look at like nursing or something like that? So I looked at nursing, and I did think about it at one point, but then I clicked on paramedic practice, and I did the same as you. I was like, oh, the idea of paramedic could be all right. But then in a different way, I never actually, I did apply for paramedic, but I applied for ODP at the same time. And on the paramedic practice page, there was a suggestions slot, and it said other people had looked at operating department practice. And I remember clicking it, and it had this black and white photo of this woman with a face mask on, like scrubbing. And then I started reading about the profession, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, oh my God, no, this is where I see myself. This is what I want. Applied and didn't get in. And then I was like, right, okay, no, I've got this. I'm going to apply next year. And then they upped the grade boundary. So I didn't quite do as well because I didn't enjoy my A-levels. And now I was like, oh. So then I ended up going back to college to do an access course. And I worked in the community. And the moment that I knew I wanted to be an ODP is when I transitioned from the community to the hospital, and I worked on a surgical ward. And there was this one day, one of my mentor nurses knew that I wanted to be an ODP. I was very vocal about it at this point because I was like, I'm applying to all of the universities that offer ODP. That is what I'm doing. That was my drive. Picked different universities so that I could make sure that I'd get there. And then she said, oh, there's quite a lot of support workers on the ward today. Do you want to go and watch a surgery? Because getting work experience in like a surgical setting is just nigh on non-existent. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah. And I remember being in this operation and watching this surgery happen in front of me, and I was like, I want to work here. I want to do this. And then I got in that time. So I remember that sort of UCAS situation of not knowing what I was going to do. But it's just you find that everyone's got this journey into it, which usually sometimes people for other professions potentially like, oh, well, I always knew from younger, or I saw it on TV. Whereas with this, there's always a different way how they found out, or they've got a family member or something like that.
Yeah, there's not many 5-year-olds running around in scrubs saying, I want to be an ODP.
Yeah.
Although it should be.
But you know what? There will be a day.
There will be. ODP reacts. Diddly 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 dee.
This is for those who can't obviously see it, but I do implore that you go and watch it after we've discussed this. This is a scene from a very famous franchise of superheroes movies. One that's about a doctor who's magic.
Put two and two together.
That's covering all bases and not brand naming, isn't it? Okay, so it starts out, so it's a scene where he's scrubbing up basically, and this has bugged me for a long time. So it starts out pretty good scrubbing technique there. Yeah, drying his hands. All right, he's letting it dangle a bit. Can let that go, can't we? Hang on a minute. I'm just going to pause that there. Rewind. I'd like to tell me the order in which you put your mask and your gown on, and confirm that you don't put your mask on after you've scrubbed.
After you've scrubbed. Well, so you could, like, if you had it, so how many times have you had to readjust the surgeon's mask or someone's mask, and you're like there fiddling with it because you've got to do it because they can't touch their face. But that's the thing, is like he's there and he's like, you've got to see his handsome, oh yes, very serious, very doctor-y face. I'm just going to pull my thing up. Yeah.
So I'll just describe what's happening again. So there he is, his fingers come out of the cuffs. I mean, that's a no-no. And then he reaches up puts his mask on after he's scrubbed, no gloves on. Oh, look, I've got my gloves on now. I'm sterile.
Yeah.
At least
I've never noticed that.
Hands up.
I've never noticed
Oh,
that.
haven't you? Oh, as soon as I saw it, as soon as I saw the movie, that got me. Do you know what's funny though? I worked with so in cardiac, where I worked, the surgeons would get you to don their gloves for them, so they would actually put their hands through the things, and you would have to then open hold the gloves for them to don it. The mask thing is unforgivable.
So it's not and this is the thing is when we've discussed these, it's not like a crazy, like, a yanker hanging out of her mouth instead of an ET tube, but that just like they've clearly gone to the effort to make it really accurate.
Yeah.
But then they've fallen down at the last minute, and what's probably happened is that somebody has come in and edited it, and probably edited it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Possibly, or probably edited it the wrong way, or they've talked through and they've got a consultant on and they've explained what they need to do and they've gone through it, because like you said, the scrubbing technique was good. The fact that the towel was dangling and you didn't see him do the other hand, but you assume that he threw it away and got another one. Like there's someone else donning the gown for them and helping them tie it back, all accurate. But you can imagine that it's like, no, we need to see his face. We need to make sure that everyone knows that it's, Benedict Cumberbatch and everyone knows who it is. So we've got to see his face before we pull the mask up. And that's just it.
Even like the theatre, I mean,
how dark it is.
Very high-tech theatre.
It's so dark.
Even like the theatre setup is pretty good. So you've got, I mean, they look like they've got 2 scrub practitioners, but they've got the nice tray set up, which looks nice and neat. Little stand. Well, little bits on. He's obviously a neurosurgeon, as we know, so he's obviously stood at the head end. Anaesthetic tube is coming down, I'm guessing somewhere around here.
Yeah, but the anaesthetist is on the other side of the room.
Is he not? Is that not the anaesthetist there?
Oh no, I think.
Oh
yeah.
I think
this is the monitor.
Oh, I thought it was the chap that's on the other side of the room.
You don't have ODPs in America, so that might be a respiratory tech or just another body.
Or it could be one of the neuro guys, like the neurotech guys.
So yeah,
even the gallery in the background as well.
I know, the gallery.
And to be fair, it is a bit dark, but I think me and Crystal have definitely been in a theatre where it's, because I know some of the neuro lot where we worked used to dim the lights and stuff, especially with certain procedures with microscopes and stuff. So it's not.
Yeah, clearly they're doing something which requires like scanning and stuff, because they've got multiple screens up with the same imaging on. So I wonder if it's just I mean, I personally have not worked in a theatre other than laparoscopic theatre that's that dark. But you might,
But just the length of the effort that they've gone to get everything else and then you just think you just failed on the basics.
Just failed on just because you needed to see his face before he pulled up the
poor
mask.
patient's brain is now infected with whatever was on Benedict Cumberbatch's
face. Yeah.
So on a similar note, I've got another one that's very similar, and I think it's a scene from Grey's Anatomy, and it's entitled "How Not to Put on Gloves." I'm gonna share this with you as well. And it's the way that, like, I think even the first one.
This first one, I think, is the worst one.
Touching all the fingertips.
Yeah, pulling all the fingers out.
As he grabs the sterile glove, he puts it on, and then he's pulling all his fingers.
Yeah. And then like even when he grabs the other one, he grabs it from the cuff and then uses his obviously sterile hand and touches his non-sterile hand. Yeah.
So so that's an interesting, like, slightly not correct way to put on your gloves as well.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
Thank you so much for listening to us at the ODP cast. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and please remember to save, add it to your library so that you can keep up to date with us. To get involved, follow us at ODP Shoe across all major social media networks. Whether you're listening on your way to work, whether you've got a coffee, or you're just waiting for the patient to be brought down to the anaesthetic room, don't forget to give us a like so that you can see what we're up to next time on the ODP cast.